So we're on the speech and language therapy training for teaching assistants session 2, and you all know me, my name is Emma. Hi. Please let me know on the chat if something that I'm explaining, if you don't understand what it is I'm talking about, if you need me to go into further detail. I'm finding it really difficult to do these sessions because I just don't have that feedback from the people that I'm usually in a room, that I can see the facial expressions to gather whether they can understand what I'm talking about or not. So please do let me know, and then we can figure it out together. So just to remind you, last time we talked about how we communicate. So I showed you this tree, and we talked about how at the very bottom of the tree you've got your roots, and these are the first thing that starts to develop when a child is learning to communicate. So they learn about things like play, they learn about turn taking, listening, eye contact, all those skills that we take for granted that children actually do have to learn about before they can develop their ability to understand what's happening, which in turn allows them to use more sophisticated methods of communication, like speech sounds and talking. We also spoke about non-verbal communication, so hopefully that is ringing some bells to you. That PowerPoint is available to you all if you would like to have a look over it at any other time to remind yourselves, and this one will be saved with it as well. But for today, we're going to look at attention and listening and vocabulary. It's quite, hi Carol and Roxanne, thanks for your message. So yeah, today's session is quite, there's a lot of, obviously, but there's a lot of just me talking at you, but a lot of what I'm doing is in the slides, because I'm aware we can't have that much back and forth. So yeah, a lot of what I'm saying is in the slides, but I still think it's important to give us your full attention. And again, if I talk about something and you don't understand, just let me know in the chat. So moving on to attention and listening. So I'm going to play you a little video clip, and I'm just going to press play, and if you can just let me know that you can hear it. I hope you can. Could someone let me know in the chat if you could hear that, please? You couldn't hear it. Oh no. Let me try again. Could you hear it that time? No. Oh, what heck. Okay. Well, my experiment hasn't worked. What I was hoping to do is just a little kind of exercise to get us into, don't worry about it, it was just a little exercise to get us into the idea about thinking about attention and so what I was going to do was play you a recording of me talking about a chocolate cake recipe, talking that recipe through, and then at the same time I was going to read you a story about a family that went on a train trip, and then I was going to ask you questions. So I suppose the point being that you would have been having to listen to the cake recipe at the same time as listening to me talking about a train holiday for a family, and then I was going to ask you questions about both of those stories, just to kind of highlight how difficult it is to zone in to what's being said when there are distractions in the room. But don't worry about it, we will move on. But just to note that children with poor attention and listening skills, probably when they're in a noisy and distracting room, will feel completely overwhelmed and will just turn off completely rather than listening to what's going on because there's too much information in the room. So really with that exercise, I was just wanting to highlight that, but we'll move on, don't worry. Okay, so we're going to talk about how attention develops now. So attention is no different to any other skill. It does have to be learnt, and there are certain stages that we all move through when developing our attention skills. So the first one is fleeting attention. So this is where the child will find it difficult to focus on one activity. They'll flit from one thing to another, and they'll find it difficult to understand directions. They may have little awareness of danger, and they're easily distracted by things that they might see, hear, and smell. And they'll move on quite quickly to new things that have attracted their attention. We expect to see fleeting attention around kind of birth to 1 year, developing around when the child is 1 year old. So once the child has got their fleeting attention, they'll hopefully then move on to develop some rigid attention. So this is where they'll focus on one activity that they choose. So they'll follow their own agenda. They may be interested in a range of activities and can maintain their attention for long periods of time. When concentrating, they'll rarely respond to you, and they're not really interested in your choice of activity. To attract a child's attention when they have rigid attention, you often have to touch them. When the child is 2 to 3 years old, they have what we call single-channeled attention. So single-channeled attention is where the child prefers to focus on an activity that they choose. So when they're engaged in an activity, they often don't carry out directions or respond when you talk to them. So to get them to do something, you have to stop him playing and then tell him what it is you'd like them to do. And you may have to call his name before he'll do things. When the child is 3 to 4 years old, they might have developed some focusing attention. So this is where they'll join in with you in an activity that you or another child has chosen or suggests. They're interested in what other people are doing, but to get him to do something, you might have to call his name. However, it's different here because he can respond more quickly and easily focus on what you say. So the child is now a little bit older, they're around 4 or 5 years old, and here we start to see two-channeled attention. So in this stage, children can move their attention between an activity and a speaker without stopping to look at them. Their attention span may still be short, but children are now ready to pay attention within a group, and they can now attend to a visual and verbal activity at the same time. Our last stage is the integrated attention. So this is, we usually see about 5 or 6 years old. Children can now carry out a task, focus their attention in various size groups, ignore distractions, and maintain their attention for a reasonable length of time. So all those descriptions that I've just talked through, when you see the PowerPoint, they'll be in the notes section. So you don't need to remember all of those, but it is important that you are aware of all the different stages. And it's even more important that you know that ages are just an example of when a typically developing child might reach each stage. You might actually be working with a child in year 6 who is still at the single-channeled attention stage. So it's good to know all stages. It's more important to know what stage the child you're working with is at and how you can support them. It's also important to remember that we all function at these different stages at different times. So for example, if someone was to open the door right now, you'd all turn around and look. This is like fleeting attention. At other times, we concentrate really hard and block out other stimuli, and this is like rigid attention. But what matters is the predominant stage of the attention level that the child is at in the lesson that you're teaching. So what I'd like you to do in your own time is have a think about a child that you work with, how they behave during a certain lesson activity, and see if you can identify what stage their attention skill might be at that time. Once you've identified what stage they're at, then we can start to put supports in place to strategies in place to support the child to develop further in that attention level and also to move on to the next stage. And just as a little note before I change slides, it's particularly difficult to remain focused if you're learning a new language and you don't understand what is being said, and it must be really tiring. So for these children, please make sure you give them more time and make sure you do get hold of their attention before you start teaching. Does anyone have any questions or comments before we move on? Okay, so some general advice. And as I said at the start, this training is quite meaty in the information that I'll give you, but it is all on the slide, so don't feel, I don't want you to feel overwhelmed and feel like you have to remember all of this. The information's all on there, and the session's being recorded, so that obviously you can listen back anytime if you need to remind yourself. But just bear with me, because it's just something we've just got to go through and talk through everything together. So, some general advice. I've already said you need to get to know the child's level of development, but you also need to find the right activity. So take your time to observe the child's interest and find out what it is that they like to do, as this is where you'll probably see the best example of the best attention that they can give. It's important to give time to develop at the child's level and not rush to get through things by your own agenda. If you have to repeat activities, then that's what you have to do to support the child and to support them to develop, rather than supporting your own agenda. To support attention and development to develop, make sure you're using keywords, you're modelling, so you are showing the child what good attention and listening skills mean, and you're using your repetition, so you're doing the same activities over again. Use lots of praise, and you could potentially look in the training for support staff attention awareness to get some more ideas. So what else can we do to help? So I think this one is really obvious, and hopefully you all know this. But it's so important to get the child's attention before giving the instruction. And this doesn't just mean that at the start of the lesson you get the child's attention. It means that every time you lose that child's attention, you stop and you get their attention once again by saying their name, making sure that they are looking to you, making sure they are listening to you, and then you start the lesson or giving the instruction again. You need to make the child aware of good listening skills. So what I mean by this is teaching the child what is good listening. I think we just presume children know what we mean when we say good listening, and actually we have to teach what we mean. So show the children what is good listening and what is bad listening. Talk to them about both. How did they look? So for good listening, you were sat still, you were looking at me as I was talking, you weren't talking to your friend. But for bad listening, maybe you were looking around the classroom, you were talking to your friend, you were scribbling in your notebook, or you were trying to finish off some previous work. So talk to the children about the difference between good and bad listening skills, so that they know what we mean when we say we want good listening. Giving them specific praise as well. So actually saying, that was good listening, you looked at me and listened to what I was asking. So naming the skill that you're talking about, that was good listening, rather than just saying that was really good. You could have, or you might already have, a Listener of the Week award. This is a really nice way of supporting the development of attention and listening skills. Just gets everyone involved, creates a little bit of excitement, and reminds children throughout the week that there's something to be working for. And you can play games that involve the need to listen in order to participate, maybe in memory games. It's really important that we reduce background noise and distractions where possible. If you think about where the child is sat, think about, are they near a door, a window, a radiator? Are there children around them who are quite talkative? Is there another more optimal space in the classroom that the child can sit in, so we can optimise their ability to attend and listen? So remember to use an appropriate level of language. We talked about language use last week, and we're going to talk about it last time, sorry, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit more detail in upcoming sessions. But making sure you're aware of what words and what language the child can understand, so that you're using that language to give them their best chance. Check that the information has been understood. So you can ask the child, what have you just asked them to do? And they could give you a rundown. Schedule time for brain breaks, because much like all of us, children need frequent breaks and rests to refresh. And having these breaks help us and also helps them improve our levels of concentration and focus. So younger children, they'd benefit from a quiet area in their classroom, while older children need breaks, free time, which you can work into your classroom's daily schedule. You could possibly set up stations in the class where children can go and do an activity to unwind. Maybe it's a little bit of colouring, some cutting out, gluing and sticking, just to give their brain a little bit of a break, but they're still engaged in some more learning. Play games to develop attention and listening skills. Simon says the memory games, such as I went to the shop and I bought, and you go around the classroom and every child has to add an item. You can give younger children, you could give them a toy each, and then you could play an animal sound. The child that has that toy that makes that sound maybe holds up his toy, he's the winner. So while the children are having to listen to what noises they're making, you can also do that with vehicles. Building activities support development of attention and listening, because often we complete those activities in a small group, so the children kind of are working together, listening to each other. And then if you make the buildings harder each time, it's going to take longer, so that's going to support the development of attention as well. And the obvious one, completing jigsaws and puzzles, there's so much research that shows that they help support our development of attention and listening. Last slide before we move on to vocabulary. So timed games and classwork are not only versatile activities to improve the concentration in children, but they're actually really appealing as well, because they want to win and beat the timer. So you could play timed games. You could have students could have a whiteboard and a marker, pick out a word from a hat, and then the kids have got a minute to write as many words that are associated with that word, or they could try and create new words from that word using the letters. They've got a minute to do it. Those kind of games help support attention and listening. And you could also give the children activities where they're kind of like sequencing stories. They could be putting pictures in the right order, or they could be putting paragraphs from the book that they're reading in the right order. They could put the sequences of the days, the weeks, the seasons of the year, their own classroom routine, anything that kind of talks about sequencing or planning. Those activities support the development of attention and listening. So we're going to move on to vocabulary now, unless anybody has anything to ask me or comment on. I'll just look down at the chat for a second. The chat is very quiet. Okay, we'll move on. Vocabulary. So what is vocabulary? I think a lot of the times me as a speech and language therapist will say to you, right, what vocabulary does the child have? Really what I'm saying is, what words do they know? So the body of words that's known to a person, that's the vocabulary. So basically, if we could write down all the words we know, if we could write those words in a book, that book would be the record of our vocabulary. So you could imagine for a 1-year-old, that book probably wouldn't be very big. They might know mum, dad, bottle, sleep, their favourite toy, family members who come to see them, those kind of everyday words. And you could write that down probably just on a half a page or just one page. But as the child develops and as the child learns more and more words, so does their vocabulary grow. So most typically developing students have the ability to learn language at a rapid rate because they can learn words incidentally. So that means that children can just learn words by simply being exposed to them, by having conversations that include these words, by experiencing them through functional context and everyday conversations. So if this happens, if this incidental learning happens, then a child of 6 years old will have a vocabulary of about 14,000 words. So a 6-year-old should know about 14,000 words. So this huge explosion of vocabulary continues throughout primary school, and kids learn new words in language-rich school environments, so that by the age of 11, the child should know about 40,000 words. So the child should have a vocabulary of 40,000 words. And as we know, many words can be learned through exposures during reading. So that's why we're really encouraging our children to read more and more. Okay, so in order to get that vocabulary, in order to know that many words, children need to learn 8 words a day. So let's say, fingers crossed, hopefully they can learn 3 words a day at home. Those words might be something new they've had for tea, so it might be that they've had spaghetti for the tea for the first time, so they've just learnt spaghetti. They might watch a new TV programme that they've never watched before. Let's pretend they've never seen The Simpsons and they watch The Simpsons. They've just learnt that word, The Simpsons. And let's say they hear a new song on the radio that's got a word in that they've never heard before. They've learnt that word as well. So they've learnt 3 words while they're at home. That means that us in school need to be targeting 5 new words a day. But the good news is kids learn the words incidentally if they're developing typically. So we shouldn't need that many kind of interventions or to go out of our way, if you like, to create too much, to put in that more and more strategies to support vocabulary, unless the child is really struggling. I'd like you to have a think about what new words you have taught today. We don't need feedback unless you want to, but I think just for yourselves, just try and think about what new words have you taught today. And bear in mind that teaching a new word doesn't mean simply saying the word to the child. So it's not enough to be driving into work and thinking, right, today I'm going to teach the child the word trainer. And then you get into school and you say to the child, this weekend I went to the shop and I bought some new trainers. And then in your little head you think, tick, I've just taught that child the word. That's not what we mean. Teaching the new word is more than saying the word to the child and having them repeat it. It's not even having the child spell it. It's all of those things, as well as teaching the meaning of the word and how to use it. So if typically developing students can learn words incidentally through their natural everyday exposures, what about the children who are drowning? So the children with language impairments. Well, the good news is those children with language impairments also learn words incidentally through this exposure. But the bad news, which hopefully isn't a surprise, is that even those students with language impairments can learn words incidentally, they do less effectively than other children. So this means that if they only hear the word a few times, they won't remember it, it won't stick. So therefore, children with language impairments may need more exposure than most kids. And we should also include children who don't have the most kind of nurturing environments at home. So they're perhaps not being exposed to those 3 words at home. We should include those in any of our interventions to target vocabulary. So these are the children that we really need to be thinking, how can we develop our vocabulary? But where the heck do you start? what words do you teach? How do you figure it out? What's the next step, basically? So for me, I think the next step is understanding that there's different types of words. And we're in the middle of coronavirus and we're all using this word tiers at the moment. And even with types of words, we've got 3 tiers. So we've got tier 1, which are our core words. So these are our high frequency words. So they're usually objects, things like bottle, shoe, orange, apple. They're usually and hopefully taught during preschool and primary, the really early preschool and early primary school years. These are your core words. Tier 1. So the next tier 2, these are sometimes called describing words. So these words you'll find across different curricular areas. They can be abstract or have different and multiple meanings. And interestingly, research is showing that many children need support with tier 2 words, but that we as adults presume that the children know these words, whereas actually we need to actually teach tier 2 words. The last tier, tier 3, these are your specialised words. So these are your low frequency, topic specific, specifically taught during lessons. And tier 3 words are often taught using tier 2 words. So you can see how if the child doesn't understand the tier 2 word, they've not got a chance of success in your lesson, because they can't understand the tier 2 words to then help them to learn the tier 3 and more specialised words. So what we're going to do now, I've got a table here with 6 words, and I'd like you guys in the chat, please, to let me know what tier you think the word nutrition is in. So nutrition. Is that a core word? Is that a word, a high frequency word? Is it like usually an object? Is it taught during preschool? Or maybe it's a describing word where it occurs across different curricular areas? Or is it a specialised word? So nutrition. Is it a low frequency topic specifically taught during lessons? What tier do you think the word nutrition falls in? I'll just go over to the chat. Is it a core word? Is it a describing word? Or is it a specialised word, quite topic specific? Yeah, we've got lots now. Yeah, tier 3. Perfect. It is. It's a highly specialised word, isn't it? Nutrition. It's very topic specific. You're not going to come across nutrition outside of a science class. Okay, so our next word, balanced. So is balanced a core word? Is it a high frequency word? Or is it a describing word, a tier 2 word? Does it occur across different areas? And can it be abstract? Or is it a specialised word, so topic specific? So balanced, what do you think? Natalie, Julie and Lynn, you've all said tier 2. Fantastic. Brilliant. Well done. It is. It's a tier 2 word, balanced. It occurs across different curricular areas. Super. Our next one is cheese. Hopefully an easy one. Is cheese our core word? Yeah. I can see your answers on the chat already. It is. It's a tier 1 word. Well done, everyone. A few more. Chocolate. Do we think chocolate is a core word, a high frequency word? Is it a tier 2, a describing word? Or is it a more specialised word? Certainly a core word for me. Julie's just said the same. Yeah. Chocolate is a tier 1 word. Well done, everybody. So healthy. Well done, Natalie. Healthy is a tier 2 word. So it occurs across different curricular areas. Can be abstract, have multiple meanings, and we can presume that children understand what the word means. We've probably taught to children about eating healthily, or we have to be outside, get some fresh air, get be a bit more healthy. We've possibly not talked to them about what that word actually means. So we've presumed that they know what that word means. Last one, calories. So is calories core one, a high frequency word, or does it occur across different curricular areas, a tier 2, or is it more specialised? Or you're all whizzes at this. Done this before? You're correct. Calories is a tier 3 word, and you've got all the answers there for you. Well done. Thank you for helping me with that. So I'm going to focus now a little bit on tier 2 words. So tier 2 words, you are Ace. So tier 2 words are describing words. Sometimes they may be linguistic concepts. If you ever hear me saying linguistic concepts, I'm just trying to be posh and show off. I'm talking about tier 2 words. Just bring me back down a peg and say tier 2 words, Emma. So we need to think of these words in a flexible way. They don't just refer to what something looks like, so the adjective, but they also include words which describe. And they are important because we've already talked about how they occur across different curricular areas. They're often found in maths and the science curriculum. But apart from the words associated with numeracy, they're often very rarely directly taught. So we'll probably teach the child some tier 2 words about maths. We might possibly focus on teaching them big and small, but do we actually teach them what fast and slow, or more, less, and yesterday, beginning? Do we actually teach them what those words mean? Please don't assume knowledge of tier 2 words. We have to knuckle down and make sure the child knows the meaning of the word. So, how can we do this? So don't assume knowledge. Said it loads. Check that the child understands what the word means. Work on one word at a time. Use multisensory approach. Does anyone want to, on the chat, let me know their understanding of a multisensory approach? Or would you like me to explain it? Super, yes. Got an answer from Julie. Using sound and visuals, that's it, exactly. Yes, so using a multisensory, and touch, well done. So using a multisensory approach. So that means that rather than the child just listening and hearing, hopefully saying the word, we're also going to help them to experience the word. So they're going to see the word. They're going to be able to smell the word, maybe. It might be that we're talking about something being spicy, or we could be talking about a certain flour, so you could bring the flour in, they could smell it. Cheeses, fantastic example of one that you can smell, well done. And the person could also touch it. So if you're teaching the word fluffy or rough, you could bring something into your classroom which is fluffy or something that is rough, so that the child can experience the touch as well of the word. And using that multisensory approach will help the child remember, because they will have experienced the word. Repeat the same activity many, many times. I sometimes have TAs saying to me that they feel like they're not doing enough because they're doing the same activity again and again. And I think as humans, we want to move on quickly and kind of, yeah, we've done that, tick, what's next? Yeah, we've done that, tick, what's next? Whereas actually the best way to support these children is to repeat the same activity over and over and over again. Yes, you might make little tweaks, but you are on the whole doing the same activity over again. You need to ensure generalization. So what I mean by this is, if you have taught the child, let's say you've brought in some cotton wool, and you've taught them that the cotton wool is fluffy and soft, and they've taught that vocabulary, you need to teach them that other things are also fluffy and soft, so that they don't think that that new vocabulary of fluffy or soft only relates to the cotton wool. They need to generalise their learning outside of what you've taught them. So support them to do that. Bring in lots of examples or talk to them and show them lots of examples of the word you're talking about. You can complete activities which compare concepts. So if you are teaching, let's say, over or big and small, you would first teach big, then you would teach small, and then you could do activities which includes both concepts. So the child is seeing both and they can see the difference between the two concepts. So I'd like you now to have a little think about how you would teach the concept under. And if you could give any ideas in the chat, and what I will do is I will take those ideas and put them into our PowerPoint so that when you're looking back over, you can remind yourself of what you said. So how would you teach the concept of under? Any examples, please? PE, that's a great idea. Yeah. Any more? I'm going to wait until I get another one. We got some really good suggestions coming through now. Thank you very much. Let's see. So we've got go under the table. Absolutely. The multisensory approach. Let the child experience it. Get the child to go under outstretched arms. Lovely. Resources, put them under the paper, put them under the boxes. The premise being that they're actually doing something. Fantastic. Get under the table. Put the chair under the table. You could do that every day, couldn't you, at the end of the day? You could be like, right, under, or even on if the child has to put the chair on the table. Yeah, some really nice examples there. Thank you for those. Did I have any others that I wanted to say to you? I think that was it really, just, yeah, allowing the child to experience the concept. Okay, let's move on. So again, I'd like a bit of participation on the chat, please. If you could let me know what you're already doing to promote vocabulary in your chat, in your classes. So remember, the key aims are that the child learns not just to say the word, but they get to learn the meaning of the word. So what are you doing in your classes to promote vocabulary already? And I'll write these answers on the PowerPoint as well for you. Super, yeah, read, write, ink, fantastic. You're probably doing a lot without realising. Yeah, modelling. You've got word of the week, super, great strategy. Phonics, yeah. Let's see if we can get one more. Lots and lots of talk and commentary. Dictionary search games, love that one, yeah. For the upper end of the school. Super. If you want to add any more, please do. I'll keep going with the rest of our slide. Okay, 5 simple strategies to promote vocabulary. Number 1, pick the right words. Sounds simple, but it actually can be the most challenging part for me and for you guys. And there's a few reasons. We want to select words which we think are going to be difficult and challenge the student, but we also want to think about words which will be the most functional for them to learn across different settings. And while it's only the first step, it actually is one of the most important things you can do, because it's going to lay the groundwork for everything you do beyond this point. So if you picked, say for example, if you picked tier 2 words, you know that by the time, and teach those words, say at the start of the month, you know that by the time you get to do a certain activity that is focusing on tier 3 words, you know that the child knows the tier 2 words that you're going to have to use to teach the tier 3 words. So picking the right words and getting them in the right order sounds like a simple and like obvious strategy, but actually it's a really hard thing to do. Just takes a little bit of time to think it through. But once you've got the right words, you'll be able to fly with it. So you need to explain what the words mean. So we know that students with language impairments, or students that have difficulty learning language and using language, we know they're not able to store and access semantic information given just a few exposures of the word. So what can make the difference for them is really simply taking the time to tell them what the word means, rather than requiring them to just kind of pick up what it means as the lesson goes on. So simply noting that, oh, this word might be a new word, I'm going to explain what that word means before we carry on. Again, it's a simple strategy, but there's proven research that shows it makes a difference in word learning. Show them how to use the word. So aka modelling, which some of you have said on the chat for how you're already teaching vocabulary. So modelling, it's so simple, but it's so important. Don't just tell them or explain what the words mean, but show them how to use it. Use multiple examples and get this word in as many sentences as possible that the child can hear and kind of experience. Getting the child to say the word in many different ways. So again, if I want to be all official, it's called production probes, but the everyday way of saying it is getting the child to say the word. So now you've explained what the word means, you've shown them how to use the word. Very simply, get them to say the word. So this could mean that you ask the child a question that the answer is going to involve the new word, or you might show them a picture or a video that relates to the word that you can have a discussion about. You might ask the child to draw a picture and then describe the picture, so they're going to have to say the word, or get the child to simply explain what the word means to you as well. And then the last one here is help the child use the words in the right way. So once you've given them the chance to use the words, you might need to be aware that they might not use the word in the right way, and that's okay because the children are still learning. So if they use the word wrong, that's okay. What we need to do is scaffold so that the children are more successful in their word use. So you could repeat the word back for them, so a bit like modelling, repeat it back for them so that they know how to use it correctly. Or you could start a sentence and get the child to finish it, so fill in the blanks. That will help the child understand how the word is used correctly in a sentence. And actually a lot of the ways of helping them use the words right are the same as the strategy of getting the child to say the words, but that's okay because we're killing two birds with one stone really by using the same strategy. We are supporting the child to say the words, helping them use the words in the right way. So we've got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to fly through just a few more strategies. So word maps, I love word maps. These are particularly helpful for tier 3 words. Apologies, my example here on your PowerPoint is only using words. That's because I don't have the skill to draw on my computer, and I fell out with the scanner. I was trying to draw you a word map and scan it into the computer, and the scanner wouldn't work, so I had to do a written example of a word map. But for me, my preference is that word maps mostly contain pictures and colours and really have minimal words. So you can see there I've got my word in the middle, that's vertebrate, so I'm teaching the word vertebrate, and if you follow the arrows off, these are how I would use a word map. So I would write a definition of it and maybe draw it. So I've got the animal's got a bony skeleton, I'd write down some antonyms, I'd write some examples, so fish, birds, reptiles, some synonyms. I would draw it, describe it, and then a really important part is helping the child to sound out how it is said. So that's the phonological information. So helping the child to realise that the word vertebrate is made up of vertebrate. So that's the phonological information, and the rest is the semantic information, like the meaning. And word maps are an effective approach. And if in school you have the Elkland language builders, maybe talk to your Senko. She might have access to this. This gives you some really nice examples about word maps. Is anyone using word maps already? Super. Some of you are. So word maps are fab, and they're based on the principle of being word wise, but they can take time. And I don't know if you guys that are using them have noticed that they can take time. So perhaps word maps should be, maybe we should reserve those for the children that are struggling the most, and have maybe a specific intervention where those children do word maps. But maybe as a whole class activity, you could complete what we call a Wordwise whiz, which I have to say very slowly. So a Wordwise whiz can be much quicker. So it's a quick oral exercise used to reinforce knowledge about a word. So a target word is selected. So my target word here is sun. And what we do is we ask the child to think of the meaning and give one idea. So the child might say it's in the sky. And then we as the adult, or we as the teacher, would say it's big and it's hot. So we've added another meaning. So the child, and we've talked about two meanings. We talk about the phonological information, so how the sounds. So the child might say it's got s in it. And we'd say, yeah, and it's also got un. So we've talked about the sound, and then we'd put the word in a sentence. The sun is warm and bright. And then the child would make that sentence, then the teacher or the adult would also make another sentence. So they're a really quick strategy, quicker than word maps, and I think possibly more beneficial for kind of whole class. And then the children that are struggling a little bit more, you could take that same word and they could do a word map. I like the idea of creating a word whiz book, which you can see in the middle of this slide, where children could write, or they could document all the words that you've taught or that they have learnt. I really like that idea, and you could obviously include your word maps in there as well. Over to the left is an example of a classroom who have a Wordwise whiz kind of area in their classroom that the children go to. The teacher will put a word on every day. So that teacher is teaching 5 new words every day through a Wordwise whiz that the children access independently. They'll go over to the area, they'll see what word is on there, and they can definitely figure out the sound because they can see the word in front of them. So they would at least be able to write down the d for delicate in that example. If they needed to look at the meaning and it was a new word, you might have a dictionary handy for them, or you could have a drawing or a physical example of something that perhaps is delicate. And you can also encourage the children to talk to each other about the word, and hopefully they can figure out the meaning and the sentence themselves. And perhaps at the end of the day, when you're kind of just before you're dismissing all the children, you could say, right, what was our Wordwise whiz? It was delicate, and quickly fly through your Wordwise whiz so that you know that that word has kind of effectively been targeted. And then over on the right of the PowerPoint is just an example of someone who's written down their Wordwise whiz there. Just kind of, that might be one way that children fill in their Wordwise whiz, and then that goes into their book as a reference. So other strategies, so examples versus non-examples. So I read about this in the I've got to get it here, the Education Endowment Foundation, which provided the special education needs in mainstream schools guidance report. If anyone would like a copy of that, I can email it to you. But they were talking about using examples and non-examples. So rather than just teaching, for example, rather than just teaching what birds are, you should also teach what birds aren't. And they say that will really kind of solidify the child's learning with regards to that vocabulary, that word of what a bird is. But what they do say is that you must, your non-example does have to relate to a bird in some way. So the 4 pictures we have here, we'd maybe talk about the fact that birds, they're animals, they have feet, they have a beak, they have wings, and they can fly. So they're all examples of birds. And then we have a bee. So talk about what the difference between a bird and a bee. And using that example, which is close but not quite, is a much better way of kind of solidifying the learning of that vocabulary bird, rather than comparing it and saying, well, this is what a bird is and a house is a non-example of a bird because a house doesn't have wings or feet. That's not as good a non-example. So when you are thinking of examples and non-examples, think of something which is close. So they have some elements the same and some elements not the same. There's another example here of addition, where you've got lots of different words and vocabulary to talk about adding and addition, and then non-examples talking about subtraction there, and the other way around. Really close to finishing. Specifically teaching verbs is so important. So if I were in the classroom teaching children and I was trying to do 5 words a day, I would include verbs in those 5 words a day. We often assume knowledge of verbs, and actually verbs are so important because they allow us to extend our sentences. So we need to include verbs in our 5 words a day and allow the children to experience them. Here is a list of some other strategies that you can do. So pre-teaching vocabulary, I know we don't have time and we don't have the staff to do pre-teaching as we would possibly want to, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. So any time that you get any time that you find a little bit more time, free time, please think, oh, I could do a bit of pre-teaching. Go to your teacher, ask them what the lesson is coming up, maybe at the end of the week or tomorrow. Have a think about the vocabulary that's used in that lesson, and then maybe do a word map or a Wordwise whiz, or talk about examples and non-examples with the children that are struggling, just to get them that exposure before the lesson comes up. You've talked about doing personal dictionaries already, making sure they know it's a new word. I think we underestimate this, but children will actually listen more carefully if they know it's a new word. So just tell them it's a new word. Think about when we're in a foreign country and people are talking in a foreign language. It's hard for us to know when the words finish and end, and it's the same for our children when we're using new words. They're trying to figure out when the word starts and ends. So when you're introducing a new word, first say the word on its own and then put it into a sentence, because that way the children will understand when the word starts and finishes, what sounds are in it, and then they can learn about where to put it in a sentence. Clapping out words, that'll help them store the word accurately. So butterfly, or those activities. Obviously we've talked about this, giving the children a chance to say the new word. If it's a new word that can be anchored to another word, like my example here, a satchel is a kind of bag, that's a really useful tool. So anchoring the word to a word they already know. So we're going to teach you a new word. It's similar to a word you already know. The word you already know is bag, and your new word, to get them all excited and interested, is satchel. Then you can do your Wordwise whiz or your maps, or talk about your examples and then put it into a sentence. And then pictures also give children something to hang on to. It's going back to that multisensory approach, so helping the child to learn the word through that multisensory approach, so they can see it, they can experience it, will help them remember and develop their vocabulary. That is our presentation done. Does anybody have any questions for me?